Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Love and Passion Stories channel, and I'm very happy to have you here. Let's get to today's story, shall we? Come with me. Duke Robert of Lancaster was in a tricky situation. He needed to find a wife who would be efficient and who, above all, wouldn't fall in love with him. This marriage was not for love, but to please the king and fulfill his obligations. However, as in many of life's stories, fate had other plans. As events unfolded, an unexpected surprise completely changed the direction Robert had set. Imagine the situation. Duke Robert had recently married, a marriage arranged by his family and the king. After only 2 months of marriage, his wife, Lady Eleanor, who had not wanted to marry Robert from the start, as she was in love with another boy, planned it and left with her great love, leaving everything behind. Robert could hardly believe what was happening. He had barely got married and his wife had simply left him. He was very sad about the whole situation. There hadn't even been time for them to get to know each other better and maybe even create some kind of connection. Not long after Lady Eleanor's departure, Robert remembered that the king had expressed a desire to meet his wife after admiring a beautiful painting of her face. This panicked him. How could he explain to the king and the court that his wife had left with another man in such a short time? He feared what everyone would think when they found out. Desperate and at a loss as to what to do, Robert turned to his childhood friend, Sir Edmund, for help. After listening to the situation, Edmund pondered and said, "Well, Robert, the solution I propose to you is not to tell the king for now that Lady Eleanor has run off with someone else and to find a replacement wife." This idea surprised Robert, but he knew he had to make a quick decision to avoid a scandal at court. Robert said to Sir Edmund, "Can you find someone who looks like Eleanor so that I can introduce her to the king and the court?" Sir Edmund started looking everywhere until he heard about a young woman called Rose, who seemed perfect for the plan. Sir Edmund contacted Rose's brother and made a tempting offer. He offered a large sum of money as a reward. Rose, who was desperately looking for a job, saw this as an opportunity to earn some money and accepted the offer. The deal was simple. Rose only had to pretend to be Duke Robert's wife, without having to get romantically involved with him. As the carriage rattled along the cobbled roads towards the Duke's huge estate, Rose felt her heart beating faster and faster. She knew that what she was about to do would change her life forever. Beside her, her brother Thomas held her hand, trying to calm her down and saying, "Remember, Rose, you are Lady Eleanor to everyone now. You must act and speak like her," he whispered. The carriage stopped, and Rose took a long breath, trying to find all her courage before getting down. Outside, Duke Robert and his friend Edmund were waiting for her. The Duke's intense gaze and imposing posture made her pause for a moment. But when he held out his hand, Rose accepted it, surprised by the softness and gentleness of his touch. "Welcome to your new home, Lady Eleanor," said Duke Robert, in a deep, calm voice. Rose smiled, feeling a little relieved. "It's an honor, Your Grace," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her mixed feelings. She realized that, despite his serious countenance, the Duke was a very attractive man. Over the next few days, Rose immersed herself in the routine of the Duke's house. Each day brought new challenges and surprises as she learned how to behave in the presence of the king. Duke Robert was enchanted by Rose's grace and beauty, which surpassed those of his estranged wife, but he pretended not to care. He maintained a distant and reserved attitude, hiding his true feelings. Edmund, on the other hand, acted quickly. From the first moment he saw Rose, he was enchanted by her. He was always there, offering to help her with anything she needed, making sure to be by her side at all times. Robert soon noticed Edmund's closeness and began to feel a little jealous. But he kept his distance, remembering that he himself had put the rule in the contract that no romance was allowed. One evening, Rose went into the kitchen in the middle of the night to get some tea. When she got close, she saw that the light was on and decided to go in. There, she found Duke Robert drinking a cup of coffee. Rose hesitated, wanting to go back, but Robert called her with a smile. "There's no need to be nervous, Rose. It's all right." Ungraciously, she sat down next to him, pulling on her nightgown to try to cover herself better. Her nightgown was a little transparent, which embarrassed her. Robert watched her for a few moments and felt his heart race as he admired her beauty. Rose had been arousing emotions in Robert for a few days that he had never felt before. Involuntarily, he closed his eyes as if he were thinking about something. Realizing that the Duke's thoughts were becoming bold and fearing that she was being seduced by him, Rose stood up quickly and said, "Excuse me, sir, it's late and I need to go back to my room." Without taking the tea she wanted, she left. Robert sat there for a long time, imagining what it would be like to have Rose in his arms. Rose went up to her room, still feeling the warmth of Robert's gaze on her. From that night on, Duke Robert's behavior changed. He became kinder and more courteous to her. One day, while Robert was on the balcony, Rose was enjoying the sun in the garden. Edmund came over, sat down next to her and said, Rose, today you look more beautiful than ever. The sun does you a lot of good." In the evening, Duke Robert called her in for a chat, his face serious and annoyed. Robert said, "I don't like to see you so close to Edmund." Rose, feeling offended, replied, "Sir, our agreement was clear, we have no amorous obligations. When I'm with Edmund, it's always in private, away from people's eyes. He's just a friend, and I have no romantic interest in him." Rose wasn't lying when she said that she considered Edmund just a good friend. From the first day she saw Duke Robert, no other man interested her. On the big day when Rose was presented to the king and the court, everything went perfectly. Duke Robert watched with pride as she played her part with grace and elegance. He was pleased with Rose's impeccable performance, and knew that her time to go home was drawing near. Then, the day before her departure, Edmund showed up at the Duke's house. He was holding a bouquet of flowers and had a special twinkle in his eyes. Edmund entered the parlor where Robert and Rose were talking. With a bouquet in his hands and a smile, he addressed Rose. "Dear Rose, I know your time with Robert ends tomorrow, but I have something important to ask you." Rose looked in surprise at Robert and then at Edmund. "Will you really marry me?" Suddenly, Robert exploded. "How dare you ask for her hand in marriage in front of me? Get out of my house now." Confused, Edmund replied, "But she's not your wife." In the heat of the moment, Robert and Edmund began to fight intensely in front of Rose. Desperate, she shouted, "Stop it now." The two stopped immediately, leaving the castle hall in a tense silence. When things calmed down, Rose looked at Edmund and said, "Edmund, I'm honored by your request, but I don't love you. You're just a friend to me." Then she turned to Robert and asked, "And you, Robert, why do you care who I marry? Our agreement ends tomorrow. I fulfilled everything. I've been your substitute wife in front of everyone, and we haven't become amorously involved." After that, Rose locked herself in her room, only coming out the next morning to leave. She wanted to avoid Robert at all costs, so that he wouldn't notice the sadness in her eyes at having to end the agreement. She was determined to keep her promise not to fall in love, but my friends, you can already tell that she was in love with him, couldn't you? When Robert woke up to find that Rose had already left, he became desperate. Rose left before Robert could confess his love to her. The days that followed were gloomy for him. The castle seemed empty without her presence. A week passed and the longing became unbearable. Determined, Robert went after her. When he found her, full of emotion, he said, "Rose, I was wrong to say that I didn't want any romantic involvement between us. I had never fallen in love before, and this feeling was unknown to me. Now I know I can't live without you. I want you to come back, not as a substitute wife, but as my real wife. Will you accept that, my love?" Surprised and with tears in her eyes, Rose replied, "Robert, I was in love with you from the beginning, but I was afraid to admit it because of our contract. I thought you would never love me." Robert held her hands and looked deeply into her eyes. "But I love you, Rose. And I want to spend the rest of my life by your side." Rose smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart, and kissed him passionately. "I accept, Robert. I want to be your true wife." Over time, Robert decided that he needed to tell the king the whole truth. He explained everything, from the agreement to how they had truly fallen in love. The king, touched by the sincerity and genuine love between them, forgave Robert. "I cannot get in the way of such true love," said the king. In addition to the king, Edmund, his friend who had previously been in love with Rose, also understood and accepted their love. "You two belong together," said Edmund, with a sincere smile. And so, amidst tears of joy, passionate kisses, and the support of their friends, Robert and Rose began a new life together. After all, love is full of surprises and second chances, isn't it? If you enjoyed this touching story of love and second chances, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories. And if you loved the story of Duke Robert and Rose, also check out the story of the Duke and his maid by clicking on the link that will appear on the final screen. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.